Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to CI Chit Chat. Mitchell with you as normal. But with the summer here, things are kind of all over the place, but good to be here. I'm excited. Variety of things that we want to kind of hit on and want to talk about, but plenty of time to answer your questions here as well. So be sure to get your questions put in the chat or hop in and ask me a question. We're here to get your questions answered. That's what this is all about. All these are always recorded. They're on our YouTube page, Continuum YouTube page, and on the Topsoil podcast. So be sure to, check those out if you ever miss one of our weekly chit chats. I want to put in a plug that we're doing a webinar tomorrow with Southwest Airlines and Astri Martin. She was a speaker at our Topsoil Summit and did phenomenal. And we want to continue the conversation with her, really dig into what Southwest Airlines is doing, the future of sustainable aviation fuel with or without tax credits, and just get her perspective on where the world is going in that space. I'm bullish on it long term, and we'll dig into that some more here with her tomorrow. So I'm sure Diana will get the registration link and stuff in the chat here for everyone. But okay, let's go back for the new folks that are on and start from the beginning like we do every time. What the heck are we talking about here with CI? CI stands for carbon intensity. It's a unit of measure specifically utilized within the energy sector. The tool that is the gold standard for calculating carbon intensity is called the GREET model. That's an acronym, but the GREET model was developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. It's been around for 30 years. And it's really the gold standard for measuring carbon intensity. It's important, and we're having these conversations because there's a tax credit that starts in less than 6 months. It's called 45Z, and it's a tax credit that biofuel producers can earn. So transportation biofuels, folks producing ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, those type of fuels, they can earn the 45Z tax credit. It's due to start on January 1st. There was IRS rules that came out on March 30 or May 31st, and they indicated that there would be the start date still of January 1. It was noted in those rules, Jan 1, indicated at least as still the start date. So we will see what happens with the rules as they come out. And we're having the conversation specifically about farmers because today about half of the carbon footprint of these biofuels comes from the grain or the feedstock that's utilized to produce the actual fuel. And at Continuum Ag, we're helping farmers to quantify their actual carbon intensity score, helping them to get that verified, helping them to lower that score. The best way to do it, use cover crops, reduce tillage, utilize manure rather than a bunch of synthetic fertilizer, just reduce your synthetic fertilizer overall, are some of the main drivers, but you got to factor in pesticide use and everything. So as we go throughout the farming year here, make sure that you're getting your data really organized. I know our operations team is probably hounding a bunch of you if you're enrolled in CI certification, if you're enrolled in our verification program. I'm sure our people are hounding you. Do take the time here this summer to get your data organized. We've got to submit our first tranche of data to the verifier by October, by harvest time. So we've got between now and harvest to get all this data organized, meaning boundaries, as applied maps, documenting everything that we've done on the farm. It's going to be a lot of data, a lot of work. And that's what we're here to help you to navigate. So things are going really well with our verifier. We are primarily working with eco engineers. They're a group out of Des Moines, guys we've known for years, great reputation in the biofuel space, and things are going really well to get our verification protocol set up with these guys. And essentially what we're doing is verifying that the CI score and the bushels that came off of that field are legit. So think of it as for every parcel of ground that you farm, you'll have X number of bushels, and you submit that to the FSA office and stuff, right? Or into the crop insurance person as you're reporting your yield. So it's nothing necessarily new, but we've got to verify that the yield is legit and verify that the carbon intensity score is legit, because every single bushel will have a CI score. I think of it as every bushel will have a certificate, basically one certificate per bushel. And on that certificate will be the third-party stamp of approval if you go through our verification program, and we'll have your CI score. Really, really exciting pilot projects that we're involved in that are being rolled out now to prove these concepts and showcase how we can do the traceability from the field where the bushel was grown and where the CI certificate was minted or was created, tracking that all the way through, linking that to the scale ticket, that kind of thing. So really cool pilot projects going on there, proving concepts, making sure that we are ready to rock and roll as we get closer and closer to game time being harvest. And then specifically as we get closer to January 1st and 45Z moving fully ahead. I do think there's probably going to be some opportunities and some pilot projects and stuff to get compensated for your data in calendar year 2024. There's a variety of pilot projects already happening. I don't think it'll be any astronomical value by any means. And I have no idea when we're going to get the actual IRS rules. I'm not confident that we'll get them this calendar year, but again, hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised. Along those lines, one of the key things I wanted to update everyone on, the USDA a couple weeks ago put out a request for information, and they are seeking feedback from the constituents, essentially, or looking for feedback from the ag sector. Here is the info. I'll put it in the chat now. We will get something sent out via an email sometime here very soon as well, and share Continuum's thoughts and Continuum's feedback. To back up just a little bit, this request for information was put out by the USDA just a couple weeks ago, and USDA put together a list of like 20-some questions that they want some feedback on, mostly about how do we quantify carbon intensity or greenhouse gas emissions, what practices should be included, how should we demand the verification protocols be implemented, how do we improve the models over time. It was pretty good questions, but for the most part, as I was going through them and spitballing my preliminary answers, a lot of my answers to USDA's questions in the short term are use the GREET feedstock calculator from the Department of Energy. It's good enough for right now. It's by no means perfect, but none of this measuring of these gases is perfect. So we cannot wait until we have things perfect. We've got to get the ball rolling. The GREET model is good enough. It's conservative, and it's quite open and encompassing. It doesn't hit on every practice. It definitely doesn't work for every county in the country. There's some major flaws in that regard, that there's certain geographies, certain counties, specifically further on the perimeter of the, on the peripherals of the Corn Belt, some of the soil organic carbon components don't work the right way. So as you get further from the I states, the GREET model doesn't work as well, but it's still the best that we got. So overall, our comments are going to end up being utilize the GREET model, then show us the data that you would like to collect and utilize boots on the ground farmers, utilize agronomy networks, utilize extension, NRCS, utilize all the tools that are out there to gather data and make sure that we're improving these models over time. Right now, it's good enough, conservative. It's going to move the needle in a major, major way. If these dollars come through the way that the law says, if there is equitable sharing amongst biofuel producers and farmers, and that whole value chain is able to share equitably, I think this is by far the biggest opportunity to move the needle in the adoption of soil health building practices like cover crops and no-till, and reducing our chemical and physical disturbance. I just think it's the best opportunity to move some serious dollars without it being direct payment coming from the taxpayer in one hand and out the other. A little bit more roundabout with the tax credits, but it gives us a new scoreboard for agriculture. And this is what we're going to hit on in the webinar with Astri here tomorrow as well. And Astri Martin from Southwest Airlines joining me on a Topsoil webinar, Topsoil podcast tomorrow. That this 45Z program, I'm so bullish on. It's trying to really be proactive on it because I believe it sets a precedent for so many other industries to follow, and a precedent for documentation, quantification, transparency, verification, pricing structures. I think it sets the precedent for the long term, and a precedent that low carbon pork can model after, or low carbon milk, or our export markets, or just being able to improve standardization of how we are keeping track of agronomic data, and set a precedent about the value of it, and a precedent about how we can quantify our environmental impact. So we've got to get this done correctly. I'm glad that the USDA is asking for information. It's my understanding that they are doing it in a proactive manner. Bill Hohenstein is the guy who is named on it, that he is asking for the feedback. Let me see, I can get his stuff. He is the director for the Office of Energy and Environmental Policy, Bill Hohenstein. I had him, I think I did a podcast with him, probably been 3 years, something like that. So on my YouTube page, I did I'm pretty sure it was with Bill. Did a webinar with Bill a couple years ago that we're encouraged to check out. We'll try to get a hold of him again and get him back on another podcast here coming up soon, after he gets through this request for information as well. But anyway, it's my understanding that USDA is trying to be proactive, trying to get some feedback and get their thoughts together, because they know that the IRS is going to ask them for this type of information. The IRS is going to ask them for some help, and they want to have their ducks in a row before the IRS asks them. So I'm glad that they're being proactive. Hopefully it means that there's some heated up conversations that are happening between the IRS and the USDA. Sounds like that's going on, and hopefully means that we're going to get some good ag friendly rules come out, hopefully sooner rather than later, for 45Z. Now that brings me into another topic that I want to hit on, that I've had a couple different meetings on and trying to get my head around, and I don't know that anyone fully has their head around it, but I forget what day it was, the Friday of 4th of July, July 5th, there was a Supreme Court ruling about this. I think it's a Chevron defiance or something like that. If somebody can maybe check it for me. But there was a ruling that was overturned that was a Chevron rule, that essentially what it did is, historically, when a law was passed, the agencies had the authority and the ability to interpret the law and implement the ruling, right? They're part of the executive branch of government. They interpret the law and they implement, meaning the IRS implementing the way that they want to, or the EPA, USDA, the Department of Energy, those groups being able to interpret laws that are passed by Congress and implement them. But essentially those agencies get the authority to interpret the law and implement it the way that they best see fit. And with this law that had been there or this ruling, the precedent that had been there for years, is that they get the final say and you can't really do anything about it. Meaning you can't sue them because you think that they should interpret it a different way. They get the law of the land, essentially. They get to interpret the rules the way that they want to. Well, that ruling was overturned. And what that essentially means, from what I've gathering from it and the conversations I'm having to try to educate myself, essentially what it means is that IRS or Department of Energy or EPA or USDA, they no longer just fully get to interpret the laws however they want to interpret them. I think it's a push to try to get, yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, some of the stuff about the Chevron ruling there. The they don't get to just interpret the law the way that they want to interpret it and get the final say. Meaning now people can sue them and it ends up in court. And ultimately, the court is the one that ends up getting final authority on interpreting the law, right? Which I can kind of see in a variety of different ways, right? That the executive branch's job is to implement and enforce the law, and then the court system is there to help to dig through any disputes. What this does is it opens up the door now for a lot of lawsuits and for disputes between entities, taxpayers, companies, individuals, entities that could sue government agencies based on how they are interpreting the law and take it to the court system. And the court system gets to make the final ruling on what the law means. So to bring that into why am I trying to educate myself on it? With 45Z, it was the IRS that we believe is going to roll out the rules. They oversee it. It's a tax credit. It falls under the Department of Treasury and under the IRS. And then they could utilize, a Department of Energy model, like what is named in the law. In the Inflation Reduction Act, it says that they should use a model developed by the Argonne National Lab and Department of Energy. But essentially now, whatever rules come out, people can sue them for it. So if your practice doesn't get included, you could sue them saying that you have damages and leaving money on the table by not getting your practice involved in the tax credit. You could sue them based on your county, right? Your county not having the SOC component and not and hurting you that way, and sue for financial losses. Some of like the rest of the whether it be look back stuff or if they go with like the 3 practice bundle approach or something like that, and you say, I can't do these practices because of XYZ limitations, whatever, it just opens up for a lot of potential lawsuits to happen. One of them that for sure is going to happen is with this concept of indirect land use change. I was talking a lot about indirect land use change. I got a lot of material on it before we got the 40B rules because it was a big hot topic. When they roll out the 40B rules, they really didn't mess with indirect land use change that much. And what it means is indirect land use change is essentially this concept that rather than this field being in corn, for example, it could be a forest or it could be prairie or something like that, if not for that field being in corn because of biofuel. And the indirect land use change there is this notion that it could be something else. And so they put a CI impact on that field as a flat metric across the board. And it used to be like 7.5 points of to the negative, right? So your score, for example, this isn't exactly how it works, but for example, your score could be a 22 instead with indirect land use change. Now it's a 29. That's not exactly how it works. The points aren't factored in, but that's the example. With the 40B rules, they only changed indirect land use change by a couple points, even though there's some environmental groups that want it to be significantly higher. Like the CORSIA model is 25 points of penalty for indirect land use change. And what we currently are sitting at is, less than 10. So whatever they come out with for 45Z, there's definitely going to be lawsuits, whether it be they don't go high enough and environmental groups say we're suing because indirect land use change should be higher, or they keep it, they go low or they go higher, and then farmers say, no, or the biofuel companies say this land has been in corn since way before biofuel was here, and we're actually losing row crop acreage, not gaining it. So it sounds like pretty much no matter what, going to be a bunch of different lawsuits, and the Chevron piece open that up. One other thing that I don't fully have my head around is there's this concept called the corner post ruling, which is essentially about the precedent, but the what do they call it? The statute of limitations. There's a 6-year statute of limitations, but because of the corner post ruling, there's ways that companies can get around it. And basically, an old company that statute of limitations is over, they could start a new company or help to back a new company who is within 6 years of getting is within the 6-year statute of limitations. And now they could basically help the old company that's got a lot of money could fund a new young company and sue, because now the statute of limitations started over, because it was within 6 years of that company being affected by an old rule. So they could opens up a lot more potential lawsuits to be happening in how laws are interpreted. So anyway, that's my take on it. Should be a lot of fun, meaning should be a lot of headaches. And basically whatever rules get put out, they're the law of the land. But there's going to be court rulings and stuff that's going to cause this to kind of be a moving target, which was kind of anticipated anyway. It just didn't know that it was going to be as much through the court system as it was just going to be, these government agencies updating rules and making adjustments as they go. So, but okay, couple of different things here. Yeah. So, Joanne, yeah, going to be relying on judges and staffs to, have the expertise so the judges have to, have their staffs look through the law and have the expertise that these agencies had. And so it used to be that the agencies had the great weight. Now it's the judges. Yeah. So that was my understanding of it. And then the Congress could pass laws that clear things up and make it more specific, right? Because the court system is just looking at the letter of the law and making their interpretation. So Congress could basically pass, rulings to fill in gaps, where before government agencies they got to kind of fill in the gaps. That the law couldn't possibly, a lot of times it can't possibly hit on every single nuance of every single rule. So the agency gets to interpret it and do it at their discretion. Now they can be sued because of that. They still are the ones that are going to first make the rules and implement it the way that they interpret, but now there's just more lawsuits and stuff that are going to happen. But I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we'll see how it shapes up. Something we got to keep watching. Another chat here. So my buddy Brian here sent me a message specifically about Southwest Airlines stuff tomorrow. And Brian, yeah, we'll get it recorded. It'll be on the YouTube page and on the podcast and stuff like that. Diana, can you get Brian's question down though, to make sure that we hit on that tomorrow? I'm sure we will, but Brian is bringing up a point. Southwest Airlines is invested in some entities where they're looking at utilizing corn stover, or the corn residue, baling that up and producing ethanol and then sustainable aviation fuel from the corn residue. And he's asking about how is that going to impact the carbon intensity score and, and impact soil health, that when we're removing that residue, we're removing some of that armor from the soil. How do we factor that in? How do we look at this being big picture, that now we remove the corn kernels, and if we're going to remove some of the corn stover, what are we doing for a long-term soil health impact and erosion control and that kind of thing? So, but we will see. Looking forward to digging into that with A-Stray tomorrow. I'm sure we'll hit on that and get their thoughts on utilizing corn stover versus utilizing the corn kernel to produce ethanol and ultimately produce sustainable aviation fuel. My understanding is it's kind of a and to both. Kind of the sustainable aviation fuel space last year was like 17 million gallons. It'll be a bit high in the US. It'll be higher than that this year. But the target is to be at 3 billion gallons by the the end of this decade, and be at 30 billion gallons by 2050. So nearly twice the size of the current US ethanol production, going to being sustainable aviation fuel by 2050. So massive, massive growth opportunities there. Todd, do you expect any payments for CI certification in 2024 beyond the pilot projects? And then what about 2025? So 2024, maybe some small scale stuff, but mostly pilot projects. The reason being is that I'm not bullish on I don't have a lot of faith in the government getting the 45Z rules out in 2024. I hope I'm wrong. It would help my world and help my life significantly if I was wrong. I want nothing more than to get us the rules so that we can move forward and make decisions knowing what the rules are going to be. It would help my life tremendously. Whether it be this all falls apart and I got to go figure out what else we're going to do here, or it happens the way that we want and it's game on. Want nothing more than to get the rules. I just don't know when those rules are going to come. And I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to get the rules, and I hope I'm pleasantly surprised. If we do get the rules, I think there'll be tremendous opportunity for getting paid for CI certification in 2024, getting paid for your CI score, getting paid for your data in 2024. It still will likely be fairly minimal payments at the beginning, then with maybe a secondary settle up payment at the end. A lot of the ethanol companies I'm talking with, they're planning on kind of doing something like that anyway. Pay you upon delivery for the corn and for the data, pay you some type of a premium at that point, and then do a second follow-up payment once they know what their CI scores are going to be, or once verification is complete, or a variety of other triggers. So probably going to be a 2 tranche payment system no matter what. Then in 2025, though, for sure, as long as we get the rules halfway is decent, the way that we want to include the on-farm practices, absolutely massive opportunities to get compensated in 2025. What we anticipate happening, and the precedent being the 40B rules, right? Not speculation, but based on the 40B rules, whenever the rules come out for 45Z, say it happens arbitrarily in April of 2025, right? Just pick a random day. In April, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, this is the rules, and it looks back to January 1, 2025 for all of the fuel that was produced starting on January 1, 2025. So the rules come out in April, but they have a look back to January 1, 2025. That's exactly what 40B did. The 40B rules came out in March of 2024, and they looked back to January 1, 2023. Same type of concept here. So whenever we get the rules, I anticipate it'll look back to January 1, 2025. So for every gallon of fuel that was produced in 2025, and that'll entice the biofuel producers to try to figure out what was the CI score of all those bushels that went into that fuel. So then they're going to be asking for your data and asking for that information. And I think you've got the upper hand by knowing what your CI score is and having your score verified by a accredited third-party verifier, like the group we work with, Eco Engineers. Puts you in the best position to show them, here's what your score is, here's your data, it's legit. We have this accredited verifier that's very well known that's behind it. We have multiple CPA firms that we're talking with that they understand what's going on, and just trying to make sure everyone knows, hey, this is super legit. We're just trying to be proactive to have all this data organized. The alternative is that, say the rules come out in April of 2025, and then you had sold corn in February, and they come after you saying, hey, do you have any data? Can you share some of that with us? And now it's February 2025, and you're scrambling to try to get your data from the last 18 months. Because it'll be the 2024 crop data, which would include practices from the fall of 2023. And just sounds like a huge pain in the butt to me to go back and try to gather all that info. So trying to be proactive to get the data. Our first tranche of data will go to the verifiers by October, by harvest time. So that's boundaries. So you got to be signed up and enrolled in the program with boundaries and as much data as we can by the 1st of October, which really means get signed up by mid-September or probably a little earlier than that. Give us some time. It's gonna be a lot of data, and it's gonna be a lot of crunch at the end. It's not gonna be super fun, but we're doing it to try to help out as many farmers as we can and make sure that the system works the right way. So first tranche data goes in October. Then we got to add the yield data by the end of the year, and the verification will be complete by February 15th. Then we will do a secondary tranche of verification. So we'll submit a new project of farmers, a new project of fields at some point in early 2025, and then do a tertiary project at some point after that. So if you're not signed up by October because you don't believe in it or you're worried, I don't blame you. It's fine. There's a lot of unknowns here. You can get involved later and do a look back verification, but I just know it's going to be more work to try to gather all the data after the fact. And I don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know what my costs are going to be, let alone what I'm going to have to pass along as a fee to go through the verification. So we know we can do it for $7 right now, $7 an acre. I know we can do it for that right now, and go to battle with you to figure out how we're going to make some money in this and make sure that, again, there's that equitable share and we've got legitimacy in the data and these programs are ready to rock and roll. So anyway, well, a lot of talking at you for the last 33 minutes, but thanks everyone for hanging out and sticking on here today. Again, a plug for the webinar tomorrow with A. Martin from Southwest Airlines. It's going to be awesome. So be sure to join us tomorrow for that. And we will see you next Tuesday for another CI Chit Chat. Be watching your emails. We will get our full response to the USDA's request for information out and make that public. And again, would encourage everybody to put in their own comments as well. USDA wants our voice to be heard, and we need to make sure that our voice is loud and clear, that if they go about this the right way, utilize the GREET model, this is going to be awesome. We're ready to rock and roll. A lot of you have very low CI scores, and you're in position to help our friends that are producing biofuels. So excited to help and be a part of it. But anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.